New prices of electric vehicles are going to fall rapidly this year. So if you're thinking of buying an electric vehicle, you might want to watch this video before you make the biggest financial mistake of your life. In this video, I'm going to be telling you about different levels and different things that are going to be happening all over the world, the UK, Europe and the US, that could mean that you could pay significantly less for an electric vehicle if you just buy it at the right time. So if you're thinking of buying an electric vehicle this year, make sure you watch the whole video to understand when might be the best time for your market to buy a car this year. Now this video will mainly be covering the UK and US markets. However, it will also apply slightly to the EU market as well. But we're going to be talking about all the factors that are at play that are going to start causing electric vehicle new prices to fall rapidly. And the first one we need to talk about is used prices. Now during the pandemic, used prices were going up rapidly. This meant that a used priced EV was the same price as a new EV, and in some cases even more than the new EV. Now OEMs are not stupid. They eventually realized used prices were the same as their new price or actually higher, so they decided to increase prices. Now many of these prices have stayed at this increased price since COVID. However, demand has not kept up with that, and used prices are sliding down, which means that the gap between new and used is really separating. And another factor at play with the separation is the fact that many of the cars bought during COVID on leases and sort of PCPs over in the UK and US, they're all coming to an end. 2-3 year leases are ending, and also some really big lease purchase buyers, as in bulk purchase buyers, are coming to an end. Now they're being dumped in the UK last year. We saw the UK saw used prices tumble massively last year. Now the US is now starting to take effect at the same tumble, because the biggest car that's electric for sale in the US is obviously Tesla, and Hertz bought loads of them for rental, and they are now dumping them onto the market like no tomorrow. And because of this huge wave of used Tesla Model 3s going on the market, we're seeing Tesla prices in the US now copying the UK price, which was last year when we saw the dump of EVs, and it's also tumbling now in the US, which means that manufacturers of new cars are going to have to catch up with that fall in price, because why would you buy a new one when you can buy a nearly used one so cheap? And if you bought a new one, its depreciation would be so high. Now the US has special things that they can pull to kind of hold the new market of EVs and new hybrids into some kind of stalemate, and this is because of federal tax grants. Over in the US, you can get a $7,500 federal tax grant against your car. Now this used to be claimed on your tax returns, but it can now be claimed direct point of sale. So when you buy a car off a dealer, you give them your voucher code, and then they claim that $7,500 federal tax grant for you. Now it currently only applies to 16 hybrid and full electric vehicles in the US, and they also have some special tariffs on China to kind of stop the Chinese market flooding. But it's also worth noting that if you lease a car in the US, you can have that $7,500 car grant on any EV. Even if it's a Chinese Polestar, it doesn't have to be on the 16 list, because the leasing company can claim back that $7,500 grant on all leases. It also, prior, you had to earn at least £7,500 in tax to pay it, to claim it. You don't need to do that anymore. You can only be paying $5,000 a year in tax, and you can still claim the £7,500 tax grant. You can also get a grant on a used EV that costs less than $25,000, and that gives you $4,000 off that used EV. However, the biggest change is going to be Chinese OEMs are now selling luxury cars that are competing with traditional car brands. Now, as we see these Chinese brands selling luxury quality cars, it's no longer the same Chinese cars we used to see 15-20 years ago in the EU, where they were offshoot brands, weren't made very well, didn't last very long, and really had poor reputation and very few showrooms. Now we have Chinese brands really aggressively targeting the UK, lots of showrooms opening. They tend to be competing with the same market that traditional OEMs are going for, and they're going for the much more luxury market with much more aggressive pricing. So what will happen to these traditional OEM brands, German, UK brands, to compete with the pricing? Now, in the past, Tesla were considered the biggest threat to traditional OEMs. Now, that might still be true, especially in the American market, but not in the UK and EU market. Over here, Tesla's share of the EV market is relatively small. In fact, Chinese EVs are likely going to overtake Tesla's brand over here as in the biggest sold EVs, and that's due to a couple of things: numbers and price. And what's going to happen to traditional OEMs is they're going to be competing with this luxury quality of Chinese brands that are coming into the UK, and they're going to have to start discounting their price to also compete with the Chinese. Now, the UK has another issue, which is we're not part of the European market anymore, which means that Chinese, European cars, they're all going to be paying about the same levies, which means that for the UK at least, the traditional OEMs have got some real competition with competing with the Chinese, especially on price. So while we're going to see some huge price reductions from traditional OEMs to compete with the Chinese cars. Now, the next big change is mainly a UK-based thing, but it could happen in other markets depending on what your election policies are and what happens with your carbon emissions. But in the UK, we have a ZEV mandate. ZEV mandate dictates that all manufacturers have to sell 22% of all their cars fully electric in 2024, and in 2025 they've got to sell 28% of their entire fleet fully electric. Hybrids don't count. Now, looking at the 24 and 28% figure, you just need to look at what manufacturers are selling each year to work out when they're behind target. And if they're behind target, they have to pay £15,000 per car they're under that target. So every car that's not EV they've sold over that target, they have to pay a £15,000 fine. So they can defer the 2024 target into 2025. So if you can hold off your new EV purchase till 2025, you're going to say which manufacturers are going to miss target, but in which case by mid-year 2025, we could see some massive price reductions on some of their electric cars to make sure they shift those numbers so they can hit target. Now, they could also really discount them November this year so they can at least have less deferred target for 2025. I also think that we're going to see some major UK brands sold at the moment pull out of the UK market. If you're wondering which of those brands are going to be pulled out of the UK, then check out this video here that I did about which ones I think they are, because they might surprise you.